The invasion of Poland, outbreak of World War II. September 1st, 1939, at dawn, German forces rolled across Poland's border under the codename Fallweis, the opening move of Hitler's ambition for European domination. Songs from state radio filled the air, then came the first bombs on the city of Wielin, killing hundreds of civilians before breakfast. Within hours, waves of tanks and soldiers, over 1.5 million, pushed across the country from 3 directions, while German Stuka dive bombers used screaming sirens to spread terror. Polish troops fought bravely, but were outnumbered and outgunned. Horses and sabers met mechanized armor and air power. 17 days later, the Soviet Union invaded from the east, finishing what Germany began. By October, Warsaw had fallen, tens of thousands were dead, and Poland was erased from maps. 2 days after the attack, Britain and France declared war on Germany, the formal beginning of World War II. That single morning ignited a conflict that would consume over 70 million lives worldwide. The invasion of Poland became a blueprint for modern warfare: speed, shock, and no distinction between soldier and civilian. It wasn't just the first shot of World War II, it was the moment the 20th century fully lost its innocence. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. June 22, 1941, as the sun rose over Eastern Europe, Hitler unleashed Operation Barbarossa,
The bombing of Hiroshima, dawn of the atomic age. August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the B-29 Enola Gay released a single bomb nicknamed Little Boy over Hiroshima, Japan. 43 seconds later, a flash brighter than the sun vaporized the city's center. In an instant, around 70,000 people were killed. Within months, radiation and injuries doubled that number to more than 140,000. Wooden houses turned to firestorms. People's shadows were etched into walls. Hospitals vanished with their patients. For those who survived, the days that followed were filled with ash, burns, and silence. 3 days later, Nagasaki met the same fate, forcing Japan's surrender and ending World War II. Hiroshima became a permanent symbol of scientific power without ethics. The moment humanity proved it could end itself in a single morning. Every mushroom cloud seen since is a reminder of that day the sky itself turned against us.
The Nanjing Massacre Rape of Nanjing, December 13, 1937, after capturing China's then capital, Nanjing, the Imperial Japanese Army unleashed 6 weeks of systematic terror on its civilian population. What began as a military occupation deteriorated into one of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Japanese troops executed captured soldiers and ordinary men on massive scales, conducting public beheadings and bayonet practice. Eyewitness accounts speak of civilians lined up along the Yangtze River and machine-gunned into the water. An estimated 300,000 people were killed and tens of thousands of women raped in just over a month. Foreign missionaries and businessmen formed a small safety zone that saved hundreds of thousands, recording the horror in diaries and films later used as evidence in war crimes trials. For China, Nanjing remains a national trauma. For historians, it stands as a stark reminder of how war erases morality and turns ordinary men into monsters. The massacre was not just a tragedy of numbers, but of intent. It proved that industrial-era armies could apply efficiency not only to production, but to killing itself.
The Battle of Antietam, America's bloodiest day. September 17, 1862, Sharpsburg, Maryland. At dawn, Union and Confederate forces clashed along Antietam Creek in a 12-hour barrier-breaking storm of lead. By sunset, over 23,000 Americans were dead, wounded, or missing, the most casualties ever recorded in a single day on U.S. soil. The battle began in a cornfield so dense with smoke that entire regiments fired blindly into one another. Bodies lay stacked 3 deep at Bloody Lane, and the creek itself ran red by the time the guns fell silent. Neither side claimed clear victory, but General Robert E. Lee's withdrawal gave President Lincoln the political moment he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the Civil War into a fight against slavery. Antietam proved the tragic duality of the Civil War, that a nation could bleed itself nearly to death in order to find its moral soul. Every September sunrise,
The sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff, the sea's deadliest night. January 30th, 1945, as World War II neared its end, the German refugee ship Wilhelm Gustloff steamed across the icy Baltic Sea, packed with thousands fleeing the advancing Red Army from East Prussia. That night, a Soviet submarine fired 3 torpedoes into its hull. Within 45 minutes, the ship rolled and sank beneath sub-zero waves. An estimated 9,000 people drowned or froze, triple the Titanic's loss of life, making it the worst maritime disaster ever recorded, yet hardly known outside Europe. Most victims were women and children. Many were never identified. For survivors, the night was not a battle, but a whispered curse, fleeing one horror only to die in another.
D-Day, the Normandy landings. June 6, 1944, before dawn, an armada of nearly 7,000 ships and craft carrying 156,000 Allied troops crossed the English Channel toward the heavily fortified coast of Normandy, France. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave hit Omaha Beach, meeting machine gun fire from German bunkers on the cliffs. The sand erupted into smoke and blood. By day's end, more than 10,000 Allied soldiers were dead or wounded. Codenamed Operation Overlord, D-Day marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Despite appalling losses, the beachheads held, allowing the Allies to push into France and eventually liberate Western Europe. Every generation since has stood in awe of that day's brutal balance of sacrifice and victory. The Normandy tides remain both cemetery and monument, washing over the graves of men who climbed hell to reclaim freedom.
the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the death of Pompeii. August 24th, 79 AD, midday over southern Italy, Mount Vesuvius let out a roar that echoed across the Bay of Naples. For hours, ash and pumice rained from the sky as a giant column of smoke rose 15 miles high. By nightfall, the mountain sent a second blast, a torrent of superheated gas, rock, and ash racing down its slopes at 200 miles per hour. The Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were obliterated in moments. People died instantly. Bodies were petrified where they stood, their last breaths captured in ash. For centuries, the cities remained forgotten beneath 20 feet of debris until excavations in the 1700s revealed streets, paintings, and the plaster casts of its victims, a snapshot of an ordinary Roman day turned apocalyptic. Thousands perished, and the eruption remains a benchmark for volcanic power even today. Scientists measure modern eruptions by a scale that often starts with Vesuvius. Its legacy reminds us that nature is not a backdrop to history. It writes some of the bloodiest chapters itself.
The bombing of Dresden, the firestorm over Germany, February 13 through 15, 1945. As World War II neared its end, the ancient city of Dresden, known for its art and architecture, became a target for the Allied bombing campaign. Over 2 nights, British and American planes dropped nearly 4,000 tons of high explosives and incendiary bombs onto the densely populated center. The result was a self-sustaining firestorm that consumed everything in its path. Temperatures reached over 1,500 degrees Celsius, melting steel and stone and sucking oxygen from the streets. Tens of thousands were asphyxiated in shelters beneath collapsing buildings. By the time the smoke lifted, at least 25,000 civilians were dead, and an entire cultural treasure of Europe had been reduced to ashes. Supporters argued Dresden's destruction hastened Germany's defeat. Critics called it a war crime against a city of refugees with little military value. Its legacy still haunts debates on the ethics of strategic bombing, how far justice can go before it becomes vengeance. Today, the rebuilt city stands as a living memorial to both the horror and the human will to rise again from flame.
The September 11th attacks, America under fire. September 11th, 2001, a clear Tuesday morning in the United States turned to catastrophe when 19 al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, United Flight 175 hit the South Tower. Within 2 hours, both stood as towers of flame before collapsing into the streets below. A third plane, American Flight 77, crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The fourth, United Flight 93, was brought down by passengers over a Pennsylvania field before reaching its intended target. Nearly 3,000 people from more than 90 countries were killed in a single morning, the deadliest terror attack in modern history. For Americans, the world seemed to pause under a sky of ash and paper. The attacks triggered the U.S.-led War on Terror, decades of conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a global redefinition of security, freedom, and fear. Every September 11, the lights that rise where the Twin Towers once stood remind the world that a single day can...
The Armenian Genocide, the deportations began April 24, 1915. In Constantinople, modern Istanbul, Ottoman authorities arrested and deported hundreds of Armenian intellectuals and community leaders. It was the first step in a systematic campaign of extermination that would claim more than 1 million lives over the next 2 years. The Ottoman Empire, fighting World War I and fearing internal dissent, accused its Armenian population of collaboration with Russia. Under that pretext, Armenians throughout Anatolia were forced on death marches across the Syrian desert. Men were executed outright, women and children perished from hunger, disease, and mass attacks along the routes. Eyewitness accounts from foreign diplomats and missionaries confirmed the scale. Entire villages erased, cities emptied, families burned alive. After the war, the Ottoman government collapsed, but accountability was limited and denial endured for a century. The Armenian Genocide became the blueprint for future mass killings. When asked about his plans for Poland's Jews, Hitler is said to have replied, "Who remembers the Armenians?" That haunting question still defines why naming atrocity matters as much as stopping it.
The Partition of India, the day borders bled. August 15th, 1947. At midnight, the British Empire formally withdrew from the Indian subcontinent, and a map divided one nation into two, India and Pakistan. The political ceremony was celebrated with flags and fireworks, but in the villages and train stations along the new frontiers, jubilation turned into carnage. Communities that had coexisted for centuries tore apart overnight. Millions of Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims fled their birthplaces in a frantic exchange of populations. Refugee caravans stretched for miles. Entire trains, later found packed with bodies, crossed the Punjab plains. Estimates of the dead ranged from 500,000 to 2 million, and more than 12 million were uprooted, the largest mass migration in recorded history. Leaders on both sides were unprepared for the scale of violence. Villages erupted in reprisal killings, women were abducted or forced into suicide pacts. The end of colonial rule was meant to bring freedom, but for weeks the new nations were defined by fire and flight. The partition left borders drawn in blood and memory, haunting India and Pakistan for generations. Even today, families on both sides speak of that summer not as independence, but as
The Haitian Revolution, the Night of Fire. August 23, 1791, on the sugar-rich French colony of Saint-Domingue, enslaved men and women gathered under cover of darkness, lighting torches and vowing to end bondage forever. Across the northern plantations, the signal spread. Fields burned, masters' houses fell, and within 2 days, tens of thousands were dead or fleeing. The rebellion became the largest and only successful slave uprising in history. For 13 years, Saint-Domingue drowned in blood. France, Spain, and Britain each sent armies to crush it. Each failed. By 1804, the rebels, first united under Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, declared the creation of Haiti, the first black republic and second independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. The revolution cost an estimated 200,000 lives and terrified every slave-holding power on earth. Yet its legacy outlived the horror, proof that enslaved people could defeat empires even as the world tried to forget the price they paid for freedom. The Indian Ocean Tsunami, the day the sea came ashore. December 26, 2004, beneath the Indian Ocean, an earthquake of magnitude 9.1 ripped the seafloor near Sumatra. It was one of the strongest recorded in modern geology,
Minutes later, a towering wall of water raced outward at the speed of a jet plane, striking coasts from Indonesia to Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and Africa. Waves up to 100 feet high obliterated entire villages. Fishing towns, resorts, and islands were swept away. Boats ended up on rooftops, highways vanished. Around 230,000 people were killed across 14 countries, and millions left homeless, the deadliest natural disaster of the 21st century. The tragedy exposed a shocking failure, the absence of a tsunami warning network in the Indian Ocean. Within a year, an international system was in place.
The Battle of Stalingrad, turning point of World War II. August 23, 1942. On the banks of the Volga River, the German Sixth Army began its assault on the Soviet city of Stalingrad. Hitler had vowed to take the city that bore Stalin's name. Stalin ordered that no soldier take a single step back. What followed was 5 months of street-to-street combat, winter starvation, and unmatched brutality. The initial bombing raids flattened most of the city and killed over 40,000 civilians. German forces pressed forward, but Soviet armies turned every factory and apartment block into a fortress. Temperatures plunged below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Snipers stalked through the ruins, and whole units vanished in hand-to-hand fighting over rooms. In November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, encircling more than 300,000 Axis troops. Cut off and starved, the German commander Friedrich Paulus surrendered on February 2, 1943, the first time a field marshal had ever done so. By then, 2 million people on both sides were dead or wounded. Stalingrad was a turning point. It broke the myth of Nazi invincibility and shifted World War II toward Allied victory. More than a battle, it was a siege of the human spirit, proof that a city and its people could refuse to die.
The bombing of Tokyo, night of a firestorm. March 9th to 10th, 1945, while Europe still burned, the war in the Pacific reached its most devastating moment. That night, U.S. B-29 bombers unleashed Operation Meeting House, a massive incendiary raid on Tokyo. In a single mission, 279 planes dropped nearly 1,700 tons of firebomb clusters filled with napalm and white phosphorus over the densely populated wooden capital. Winds fed the flames into a roaring inferno that moved 4 miles wide through the city. Oxygen was sucked from shelters, the asphalt boiled beneath bare feet, and families drowned in canals used as escape routes. By morning, an estimated 100,000 people were dead and over 1 million homeless, the deadliest single air raid in human history, surpassing even Hiroshima and Nagasaki in immediate casualties. Tokyo's skyline was erased in 6 hours. The attack was justified as a way to cripple Japan's war industry, but the targets were indistinguishable from homes. Long after victory, the city survivors spoke of a night when the air caught fire and humanity seemed to melt with the roofs above it. The bombing of Tokyo remains a grim lesson in modern warfare, that technological precision means nothing when moral boundaries have already burned away.